the one qualm I had with the English translation, again, going back to D&D, is there's a section where they talk about D&D very briefly, about how one of the characters like got introduced to D&D, and they start naming the race and class of the characters that they played, and in the book they say that they played an archer. And when my friend first told me about it, I was like, there's no archer, obviously there's no archer class in D&D. If you don't play D&D, there's no archer class in D&D. There's a class called Ranger, which is meant to be a double entendre of the fact that they do have a ranged weapon, but they also range the terrain, and they're, like, good at being out in nature. So it's a double meaning. So I was baffled when he first sent that to me. I was like, what is the archer class? It has to be some kind of homebrewed thing, or they just don't understand the game. What's going on? And then I read it, having in mind that it was a translation, because I did study translation a bit in school, like the theory of translation, and the technique of it. So I was like, I had my translator brain on, being like, okay, like what choices did they make? What things did they pick to do? And I forgot that the D&D thing was in there. And then when I got to it, I was like, oh, this is just they just translated the French word for ranger into English and picked archer, but didn't actually look up what the English terms are in D&D. Got it. Okay. So that was the one thing I was like, you couldn't have looked up the rules? Like, I know that's extra work, and translators don't always have the most time, but this was an extremely polished translation, like, extremely fluent. It did not read like a translation. Sometimes you read a translated text and you're like, this is so stilted and academic, and this doesn't, like, anytime you read a Russian play, it's like an academic translated this, no human talks like this, and it's like not fluid. This was a very fluent, and I don't mean fluent like the translators, because obviously the translator is fluent in English. I mean, the language feels like it could have been written originally in English. That's what I mean. So the fact that they just couldn't have looked up the terminology for this game was like, okay. So that's what happened. It was just a translation thing. And anyway, rant over.